Now recognize the ranking member, Dr. Ruiz from California, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Select Subcommittee's first hearing should provide an opportunity for our members to carry out credible, responsible oversight to prevent and prepare for future pandemics. Instead, House Republicans invited a writer whose extreme and dangerous views have been echoed by white supremacists to testify on the issue of the novel's coronavirus origins. In May of 2014, David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, hosted a radio show praising Mr. Wade in his book, A Troublesome Inheritance. Mr. Wade, are you aware of David Duke's praise of your views on his website?
When my book first came out, Mr. Ruiz, I think the extreme right wing thought it would help their cause, but they very soon dropped referring to it because when they actually read it, as many people who talk about my book have not,
well,
they found that
David Duke did read your book. In fact, he had a whole radio talk show about it and described it in detail, and he did endorse your views. On a post, davidduke.com, promoting his radio show, he states, quote, "Hear Dr. David Duke speak on the former science editor for the New York Times, who has now essentially embraced the scientific racial truth that Dr. Duke wrote extensively about in My Awakening and has written about for more than 35 years. You see, Mr. Wade's book deploys dangerous tropes and stereotypes about minority communities under the guise of science. His assertions define the overwhelming consensus of scientists and researchers, including those in the fields of population genetics and evolutionary biology. Dr. Redfield, as a former CDC director, do these views trouble you?
I'm sorry, I was distracted. I'm sorry, I was distracted.
What do the views that I mentioned and the David Duke's endorsements of Mr. Wade's book trouble you?
I'm not a fan of David Duke at all. I do think that Nicholas Wade, and I've followed his work over 30 years, is an outstanding science reporter and has contributed substantially, both in nature science and, of course, leading the New York Times.
You know, there are 140 faculty members and experts who strongly disagree with you. In fact, more than 140 faculty members and experts jointly condemned Mr. Wade's book in a joint letter to the New York Times book review, stating, quote, "We reject Wade's implication that our findings substantiate his guesswork. They do not. We are in full agreement that there is no support from the field of population genetics for Wade's conjectures." Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter this letter into the record.
My only comment,
I'm sorry, Dr. Redfield. The point is, inviting someone with discredited and dangerous views like Mr. Wade's to testify on the origins of this pandemic, which has disproportionately harmed communities of color, is not responsible and credible oversight. Instead, it undermines the credibility of this Select Subcommittee. Now let me turn to you, Dr. Allwater. You are a practicing physician, a professor of medicine, and the former president of the Infectious Disease Society of America, representing more than 12,000 physicians, scientists, and public health experts who specialize in infectious diseases like COVID-19. For the sake of putting people over politics, what credible steps can be taken to advance our understanding of the novel coronavirus's origins in order to prevent future pandemics?
I think building trust among scientists and public health communities is essential because pathogens can emerge from where we least expect it. We need to have the tools available to rapidly analyze and then develop tests. I had dealt with patients very early in the pandemic where we were making educated guesses whether they had COVID-19. We need to have tests that can be widely dispersed quickly and treatments.
Dr. Allwater, is it possible that we will never have the concrete evidence to determine with certainty the origins of COVID, whether it was a lab leak or animal transmission?
Well, I think that's entirely possible. And therefore, we need to focus more on, also be
So-
forward-looking as well as looking back.
So having said that and being forward-looking, would it be responsible to start coming up with solutions to deal with whether it was a lab leak or animal transmission? For example, is there an international body that promotes safety guidelines and has the authority to have inspections and incentivizes foreign nation labs to have transparency so that we can be assured that labs are safe in foreign countries, especially in not-so-friendly foreign countries?
Yes, and I think, as already been hinted, that I think is essential for general protection.
In my research, I couldn't find one. Do you know of any such body that exists?
No, but I'm saying that's absolutely necessary.
And what can we do if it was an animal transmission, looking forward to save lives? What can we do to better our ability to prevent that? I know it's difficult. Identify it early and contain it in other countries before it spreads. What can we do?
Well, you know, there were efforts a few years ago to build surveillance labs under prior administrations in an effort to anticipate and work with other countries.
And what happened to those labs?
I believe they were dropped or discontinued due to lack of funding.
Okay. Thank you, and I yield back.